The midday hush lay heavy all around. Shazia's mother had dragged her along to the market by force, and now both were laden with heavy sacks of vegetables on the return journey. The fierce heat parched Shazia's throat. She pleaded, "Amma, please let me rest under a tree for just 2 minutes. I'm dying of thirst." But her mother snapped in irritation. "We're still far from home, and the vegetables are cheapest here. If we stop now, it'll be evening before we reach. Come on, hurry up!" They pressed on until Shazia staggered, went dizzy, and collapsed unconscious to the ground. When she awoke, she found herself inside a spacious, elegantly furnished room. As she looked around in bewilderment, her mother sat beside her, clutching her head. "Shazia," her mother scolded, "you fainted in the heat. If I'd known how fragile you are, I'd never have brought you here." Relief washed over Shazia as she inhaled the cool air from the air conditioner. A woman quietly pressed a glass of water into her hand. Shazia drank greedily, then took a steadying breath. "Amma, where are we? What place is this?" she asked. Her mother explained, "You collapsed on the street. A kind driver saw you, helped us both into his car, and brought us here. His home is nearby. Now that you're conscious, we should leave before anyone notices. I owe him a debt of gratitude, but I'm anxious to get out of here." Shazia straightened her shawl and tried to stand. Just then, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s entered. Seeing Shazia upright, a warm smile spread across his face. "Thank God you're awake," he said. I've already called a doctor. You should rest a bit and have him check you out." At the mention of a doctor, Shazia panicked. "No, uncle, I'm perfectly fine, just dizzy from the heat. Thank you for helping us, but Amma and I really must go." He chuckled kindly. "All right, I'll cancel the doctor, but please sit for 2 minutes longer." He called a maid and had some sherbet brought in. Shazia and her mother drank the cool, sweet drink at once. "Thank you so much for your help," they both said, finishing the sherbet. Her mother signaled that they should leave before the heat took any more toll. The man summoned his driver, who escorted Shazia and her mother back to their home. Once inside their own front door, Shazia's mother gathered up the vegetable sacks and thanked the driver again. As they climbed the stairs, Shazia remembered the cool room. "Amma," she sighed. "That house was so lovely and cold. Here, the moment we step inside, it feels like the air's been sucked right out of us." Exhausted, Shazia lay down on the charpoy. Her mother fussed over her. "Look at the time you've wasted, all for cheap vegetables. Your father will be home any moment, and you'll be craving that AC again." Shazia's mother was at her wit's end. At just 14, Shazia was frail and thin, barely strong enough to carry the heavy sacks of vegetables her mother insisted they buy in bulk from the market. Every time she tried to eat, Shazia poked at her food, chewing only a few morsels before pushing the plate aside. Her mother longed for her daughter to grow tougher, more resilient, someone who could help with back-breaking labor and contribute to the household. But Shazia was simply too delicate. After only a few steps, she would grow exhausted, her breathing ragged, her legs trembling until she could barely stand. That morning, as the sun beat mercilessly down, Shazia's mother had marched her to the market, determined to find the cheapest vegetables. On the way home, Shazia's strength finally gave out. She lurched forward, head spinning, and collapsed at her mother's feet, unconscious in the dust. Her mother had been frantic, but help arrived in the form of a kindly stranger, a man who drove them to his nearby home, where the air was cool and the walls were silent with luxury. As the chilled air from the air conditioner revived her senses, Shazia lay on a plush couch, her mother admonishing her for her weakness. Back in their modest kitchen later that day, Shazia dragged out the vegetable sacks and began chopping without a word. Her mother hovered nearby, disapprovingly watching each slice of the knife. Shazia's mind was far away, replaying the image of the stranger's opulent bungalow, the delicate drapes, the polished floors, the ornate furnishings. It struck her how some people possessed unimaginable wealth and every comfort, while others like her and her mother subsisted on the barest necessities, always counting pennies. At school, Shazia attended a government-run institution where most of her classmates came from similar humble backgrounds. Still, she noticed how many of the other girls, especially the principal, wore beautiful, expensive clothing and fine shoes. The principal's wardrobe always caught Shazia's eye. Crisp blouses, tailored skirts that swished elegantly, and footwear that gleamed. Sometimes, Shazia found herself daydreaming. If only she had those shoes to click across the classroom floor, those smart blazers to wrap around her shoulders. Even her teachers seemed to hail from more privileged families, and Shazia secretly hoped that one day she too could become a teacher, earning enough to afford the finer things in life. But for now, she was only a ninth grader, still in the thick of her studies. Her mother repeatedly urged her to learn a useful trade alongside her education, to sew, to embroider, to learn any craft that might bring in extra income, so she could help support the family. Yet Shazia's heart was set on the dream of acquiring pretty dresses and stylish shoes. She had neither the patience nor the passion for needlework, and she begrudgingly returned her focus to her textbooks, willing herself to excel in the hopes that a teaching scholarship or some other opportunity might come her way. The next morning, as dawn's pale light streamed through their small doorway, a sleek car rolled up in front of their humble home. Word spread through the dusty lane that someone important had arrived. Shazia and her mother exchanged astonished glances. When the man from the bungalow stepped out, clad in crisp trousers and a light shirt, it felt like a dream. He carried boxes of fruit juices and an assortment of fresh fruits, apples, oranges, grapes, neatly arranged as though they were precious gifts. Shazia's heart thumped. This was the same man who had rescued them from the midday heat just the day before. He greeted them warmly, concern in his deep-set eyes. "How are you both feeling today?" he asked, lifting one of Shazia's mother's worn sacks with surprising ease. Then he asked permission to come inside. Shazia darted a glance at her mother, who quickly nodded. Inside the simple house, the man settled onto the charpoy, surveying their modest furnishings with a thoughtful expression. He handed Shazia the juices and fruit, his tone gentle. "I brought these for you, my dear," he said, addressing Shazia. "I worry that you don't eat enough. You're too thin and fragile." His words, though kind, cut through Shazia's cheeks like a blade of ice. She lowered her eyes, cheeks flushing. Her mother, cheeks red with embarrassment, hurried to thank him. "It isn't necessary," she stammered. "She was only dizzy yesterday because of the heat." But the man smiled at Shazia once more and added, "No, your daughter is special. So delicate, so lovely. I worry about her health." Then turning to Shazia, he began asking about her studies, her favorite subjects, her dreams for the future, whether she enjoyed learning. Shazia's mother, however, grew increasingly uneasy. If word spread that a well-dressed stranger had spent time alone in their home, the neighbors might talk. And her husband, strict and quick to anger, would not approve of a man visiting without formal invitation. Though she had hesitated to invite him in, she found herself unable to ask him to leave. And as she watched Shazia animatedly answer his questions, discussing algebra and literature and her ambition to become a teacher, her heart pounded with both pride and fear. Pride at her daughter's confidence, and fear at what rumors this meeting might spark in their tight-knit community. Yet for now, the man remained seated, listening intently, as mother and daughter sat across from him, two fragile women and one curious, kindly benefactor, in the small, bright house they called home. Shazia had quickly prepared and served sherbet to the stranger, and even as she watched him drink, he studied her with thoughtful, intense eyes. After what felt like an age, he finally rose, excused himself, and departed. The moment his car rounded the corner, Shazia's mother exhaled deeply, her tension palpable. "What am I going to tell your father?" she fretted. "The whole neighborhood watched us all day. By evening, he'll know someone arrived in a big car, and I didn't even tell him the truth about yesterday. How you collapsed and we ended up at a stranger's house." She buried her face in her hands. Shazia offered a gentle suggestion. "Amma, why not just tell him exactly what happened? What's there to fear?" That evening, when Shazia's father returned home, he'd already heard the rumors swirling through the street that a large vehicle had pulled up at their front gate. As he stepped inside, he began questioning his wife bluntly. "Who was here today in that fancy car? And why did you invite a complete stranger into our home while I was away? And why did you take our daughter to someone else's house?" Caught off guard, Shazia's mother could only stammer explanations. "I'm sorry," she finally admitted. "Shazia fainted in the heat. The man drove us here to rest and gave us water and juice." Her husband's eyes darkened in anger. "You let your daughter go with another man? If anything improper had happened, He paused, taking a breath. Despite his fury, his parental concern shone through. Your daughter collapsed in the street. What could I have done? Shazia's mother launched into a hurried defense, voice trembling. Meanwhile, Shazia darted inside, grabbed the unopened juice box, and returned to her father. Abba, she pleaded, pressing the carton into his hands. It's very hot. Please have some juice. Her father took the box silently, sat down on the charpoy, and opened it. He drank the rich, sweet juice, then held out the empty carton. What else did he bring? He asked. Shazia produced a plate of fresh fruit, apples, grapes, slices of melon, from the table. Her father's eyes widened in surprise. This man is extraordinarily kind, he said after a moment's pause. He didn't just take pity on us. He brought these gifts himself. God bless him. His words lifted the weight from Shazia's mother's shoulders, and she nodded, relief and gratitude mingling on her face. 4 days later, the same man stood once more at their doorstep. Shazia ran eagerly to open the gate, welcoming him in without hesitation. Her mother, however, shot her daughter a warning look. Inviting him again seemed unwise. But Shazia had already guided him into the living room and settled him onto the charpoy. He glanced around the modest space, then explained, I came today for a special reason. Ever since I met Shazia, I've felt something change in me. My first wife passed away years ago, and my son lives abroad. I live alone now, and I've realized how lonely life can be. I want to start anew, find happiness with someone. I find Shazia delightful, and I've come to ask for her hand in marriage. At this, Shazia's mother sprang to her feet in shock. She stared at him incredulously. He was at least 50 years old. Her daughter was only 14. Marriage? The notion was absurd. Sir, she said firmly, her voice trembling with anger, you are far too old. My daughter is still a child, just 14 and still in school. We have no intention of discussing marriage at this time. The man, introducing himself as Kamar, smiled gently. Please discuss it with your husband. I am in no hurry. He rose to leave, then signaled his driver, who stepped out and unloaded more gifts. Boxes of sweets, exquisite jewelry, and a pile of fine clothes. My name is Kamar, the man said over his shoulder. These are for Shazia. Even if you refuse my proposal, she has my blessing. Consider them a token of my respect and affection. Despite her embarrassment, Shazia's mother tried to refuse, but Kamar's resolve was clear. With a final nod, he departed, leaving the gifts behind. As the door closed, Shazia's mother sank onto a chair, distraught over what had just transpired. Across the room, Shazia's eyes sparkled with delight. She eagerly examined the bracelets and necklaces, the shimmering dresses and shoes, luxuries beyond anything she had ever known. In that moment, the gulf between Shazia's dreams and her family's realities lay starkly revealed. The innocent hope of a young girl enchanted by wealth and kindness, and the desperate worry of a mother torn between gratitude and propriety. And at the heart of it all stood Kamar's unexpected generosity, an offer that would test their bonds, their judgments, and the fragile innocence of a 14-year-old girl on the threshold of womanhood. Amma, just look how beautiful and expensive this set is, Shazia whispered, holding up the crimson dupatta. The red brings out my fair skin so nicely. She draped it over her shoulders and turned, beaming to catch her mother's approval. But her mother's patience snapped. She yanked the dupatta away and flung it aside. Have you gone mad? She hissed. These things are not for you. What am I going to tell your father? I shouldn't have accepted anything from that man. Now, how do I explain a 50-year-old gentleman showing up to ask for your hand? Is this something to celebrate? She clutched her head in frustration. Shazia's eyes danced with excitement. Amma, look at the money and all these gifts. Everything is handed to me without lifting a finger. Imagine, if I arrive at your home in a car like his, think how the neighbors will react. They'll admire our family, bring us treats, and beg to be our friends. You know how the children chase any fancy vehicle that comes down our street? And in a little while, Aunt Bilkis will be asking me why a big car rolled up to our house. So you simply tell her, that's because he's my future son-in-law. Shazia swept her hair back over her shoulders, adopting a regal air. Her mother stared, alarmed at this sudden change in her daughter. 14 years old, hardly more than a child. Yet here she was speaking openly of marriage to a man old enough to be her grandfather. Have a shred of modesty, her mother scolded. How can you even mention marriage to such an old man? Shazia's lips curved in a sulky smile. Amma, I'm about to get everything I've ever dreamed of. Please, think before you dismiss it. With that, she swept into her room, leaving her mother standing in the fading afternoon light, torn between relief that the discussion was over and anxiety about what lay ahead. For hours, a tense silence enveloped the house. When Shazia's father finally returned from work that evening, his wife laid out every gift before him: jewelry boxes, neatly folded garments of fine silk, and the heavy dupatta. He lifted a gold necklace, turning it over in his hand, astonished by its weight and craftsmanship. How did this happen? He murmured, riveted by the gleam. A man so wealthy dropped off these expensive gifts at our doorstep, all in the name of proposing marriage to our daughter? His brow furrowed, but rather than anger, his face showed incredulous wonder. This felt like a dream. I can't even comprehend it, he admitted slowly. Shazia is only 14 and this man is in his 50s, with a grown son living abroad. He set the necklace down, pacing the small living room. How could I possibly allow our daughter to marry someone 10 years my senior? His wife stood by, pleading in hushed tones. He lifted the necklace again, inspecting the hallmark to confirm it was genuine gold. There's no wrong in this proposal, he said at last, surprising her. A match with such a wealthy man won't come again. If we accept, it would secure Shazia's future, and ours too. We must ensure her mar includes a car and a house, so no one could ever take advantage of her. Shazia's mother stared, aghast. But look at our home, she protested. The paint is peeling from every wall. I earn just enough to buy 2 meals a day, and you want to marry our daughter off so young? What kind of future is that? He paused, turning to his wife with calm resolve. If I don't accept this offer, she will always live in want, the way I do now. We grind every day for mere survival. This marriage could lift her into comfort and security. I see no harm in it. His words hung in the air as dusk settled. Shazia's mother sank onto a wooden chair, torn between her husband's reasoning and her own fears for their daughter's childhood. Outside, the mingled scents of cooking and evening air drifted through the open window. Inside, a family stood at the crossroads between tradition and necessity, deciding whether a child's life should be pledged to a promise of stability at the cost of her innocence. I decided to do some background checks on Kamar and draft a Mar agreement that would ensure Shazia's security and elevate our family's standing in the neighborhood. Contrary to my mother's lingering doubts over the age gap and social mismatch, my father gave his wholehearted assent almost immediately. When Shazia learned the news, she was ecstatic. Just wait, Amma, she exclaimed. You'll see how our lives change overnight. But her mother remained uneasy, muttering constantly that the match was neither age-appropriate nor socially equal. My father quietly commissioned discreet inquiries through trusted contacts. They confirmed that Kamar owned multiple successful companies and was extraordinarily wealthy, truly lacking for nothing. Armed with that information, my father was ready to accept the proposal. 2 days later, Kamar's driver came calling to ask for our formal answer. Cornered by my husband's decision, my mother reluctantly agreed. The very next day, Kamar arrived himself, bearing an abundance of wedding outfits, jewelry, and household goods for Shazia. He spoke excitedly of accelerating the wedding preparations. My father, insisting that he be included, joined Kamar and my mother for their first face-to-face meeting. Standing together in our modest living room, my father wrapped Kamar in a warm embrace and pledged his daughter's hand on the spot with only one stipulation: please, no extravagant celebrations. Kamar reassured him, I will cover every expense. And with that, he pressed a check for 200,000 rupees into my father's hand. Prepare a simple wedding, he said. 1 week from now, I will take your daughter to our home. My mother immediately rang Aunt Bilquis to share the astonishing news. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. First, the arrival of Kamar's sleek car, then the lavish gifts, now Shazia's impending marriage. Some neighbors murmured incredulously at the thought of a 14-year-old girl marrying a man in his 50s. Others shrugged. Shazia herself had no objections. Her eyes had grown bright at the promise of wealth, a grand bungalow, and a life far removed from the drudgery of our humble existence. In the course of a single week, my parents completed all the necessary arrangements. Invitations were extended to every household in the neighborhood, and on the appointed day, a joyous wedding ceremony was held in the community ground. My parents seated side by side beneath a simple canopy. Kamar arrived in a polished black sedan, flanked by his driver. Traditional music played as I, dressed in silk and jewels, walked across the dais and exchanged vows with Kamar. Cheers rose from the crowd as I was escorted away, no longer Shazia, the struggling schoolgirl, but Mrs. Kamar. When I arrived at Kamar's mansion that evening, my heart soared. Never had I imagined my life could change so completely. In his study, he presented me with an exquisite gift, an heirloom necklace heavier than it looked, set with diamonds that caught the lamplight like captured stars. Smiling, he declared, "I have fulfilled every condition set by your parents. Now it is your duty to obey me." Before I could respond, Kamar stepped aside and opened the bedroom door. A young man of about 25 entered. It was Faraz, my new stepson, whom Kamar had mentioned lived abroad. Faraz looked just like his father, dark hair, warm eyes, and an easy smile. My breath caught in surprise. I dipped my head to greet him. He walked over, seated himself on the edge of the bed, and gently took my hand. His bracelets tinkled as he playfully traced my fingers. Kamar stood in the doorway, watching with a satisfied grin. "From this moment on," he proclaimed, "you are the mother of my son, Faraz." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Faraz looked at me with innocent curiosity. His eyes welcomed me as tenderly as I had welcomed the thought of palace-like rooms and fine clothes. The reality of my new role settled over me like the layers of my bridal lehenga. I was no longer merely a child stepping into marriage, but a woman bound by duties not just to my husband, but also to his son. In that grand mansion, draped in silk and diamonds, I realized that my childhood dreams had come true in ways I could never have foreseen. Yet the promise woven through my father's reassurance, the car in the mahr, the house deed, the financial security, hovered in my thoughts as I faced my first test, to balance the lavish gifts and newfound status with the responsibilities of wife and mother, all at the tender age of 14. Yet as Faraz smiled up at me, I felt an unexpected surge of determination. I would learn, grow, and prove worthy of the life that lay before me. Hearing Mr. Kamar's words, Shazia was shocked. He said, "I'm going out now. Taking care of my son is your responsibility." With that, Mr. Kamar walked out of the room. His son, meanwhile, began playing with Shazia's bangles, breaking them one by one. He was a 25-year-old mentally challenged man who had now begun taking out his frustrations on Shazia. "Bride, bride," he kept repeating, sometimes laughing, sometimes clapping, and sometimes pulling her hair. 14-year-old Shazia tried to get away, but he was a tall, broad man, and escaping from him was impossible. In no time, he began tearing at Shazia, hitting her, and leaving her in a terrible state. Her hair was completely disheveled, jewelry hanging from her neck, and her clothes were in ruins. All this, while he kept doing strange things to her in the name of play. He continued this for quite a while and then, calling her my bride, laid his head in her lap and fell asleep. Shazia sat there, stunned and broken, mourning her fate. In the morning, when her husband came into the room and saw her condition, he smiled and said, "My son loves brides. That's why I get married, for him. Every time he sees a bride, he becomes very happy. This time, I want you to stay with us forever. You don't have to do anything. Just be a bride for my son every night." He continued, "My son once married someone he loved, but the girl he married was in love with someone else. On the wedding night, she took poison and died. Since then, my son hasn't been mentally stable. He screams, 'Bride, bride,' all the time. That's why I keep bringing girls dressed as brides for him. When I saw you, I thought, why not bring a bride forever? From now on, my son is your responsibility." Shazia began crying and said, "What was my fault? He did terrible things to me." She showed him the bite marks on her neck. Mr. Kamar smiled and replied, "That's what we gave your parents so much money for, so you could make my son happy. Let him do whatever he wants." Mr. Kamar had married Shazia, but not for himself, for his mentally ill son. He had handed her over to him and felt at peace. Meanwhile, Shazia was in complete distress. Every night, that boy would come into her room calling her bride, doing strange things to her, hurting her, and finding joy in it.